When the nurse smiled at me and said, "That room's been empty for years," I froze. The screams I'd heard last night were real, terrified, desperate, and echoing through the hallway. But when I checked this morning, room 212 was locked, dark, and untouched, like no one had been inside for a very long time. Still, I know what I heard, and what I found when I opened that door changed everything I believed about this place. Hi, my name is Nora Hayes, and I've been living in Silver Pines nursing home for months. I thought this was just a quiet place to recover and rest. But last night, something inside these walls reminded me that not all cries for help come from the living. Before I tell you what really happened, make sure to subscribe to my channel and comment where you're watching from, because what I'm about to share is something you won't forget. When I first arrived at Silver Pines nursing home, it seemed peaceful, the kind of place people come to heal and find comfort. The building sat on a quiet stretch of land, surrounded by tall pine trees, their shadows stretching across the windows in the evenings. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and lavender, and the staff greeted me with polite smiles. After my hip surgery, I needed help walking again, and my son, Jacob, insisted this was the best place for me to recover. At first, I didn't mind being here. My room was small but bright, with a big window that looked out onto the garden. My roommate, Helen Ward, was a cheerful woman who loved to talk. She'd been living there for over a year and knew everyone by name. She told me stories about the nurses, the other residents, and how the days here never really changed. "It's the same soup on Tuesdays and the same gossip on Thursdays," she joked. Her laughter always made the place feel a little less lonely. Still, I missed home. I missed my husband, David, who passed away 2 years ago, and the sound of my son's voice when he wasn't rushing off to work. Jacob visited once a week, always bringing flowers and updates about his kids, but I could tell he was just trying to do his duty. When he left, I'd sit by the window and watch the light fade, feeling the quiet wrap around me like a heavy blanket. Most days were ordinary: breakfast at 8, physical therapy at 10, lunch at noon. After therapy, I'd read by the window while Helen watched her favorite TV shows. The nurses were efficient and polite, but there was something distant about them. They moved through the halls like they'd done this for too many years, smiling out of habit, not warmth. One nurse, though, stood out: Grace Miller. She was younger than most, maybe in her early 40s, with kind eyes and a calm presence. She always took the time to ask about my day or how my hip was healing. When I couldn't sleep, she'd bring me tea and talk quietly until I felt calm enough to rest. I trusted her, maybe more than I should have. Then there was Sister Evelyn, the head nurse. She was polite but cold, always strict about rules. If anyone complained too loudly or broke curfew, she reminded them who ran the place. Helen once whispered to me that everyone feared her, though no one said why. "She doesn't like questions," Helen warned. For a while, life at Silver Pines felt predictable, safe even, until that night. It started just after midnight. I had just turned off my reading lamp when I heard it. A sound that sliced through the quiet like glass breaking. A woman's scream. It was faint, but unmistakable, coming from down the hall. I sat up quickly, my heart racing. Helen stirred beside me. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. Helen frowned. "Probably someone having a nightmare." But the sound came again, louder this time. A cry for help, desperate and panicked. "Please, somebody!" It came from room 212, I was sure of it. I pressed the call button near my bed, my hands shaking. Within minutes, the door opened, and Nurse Grace walked in. "What's wrong, Nora?" she asked softly. "I heard someone screaming," I said. "It came from room 212. She was begging for help." Grace's expression didn't change. She smiled gently, almost too calmly, and said, "Mrs. Hayes, room 212 has been empty for years." I stared at her. "That's not possible." I heard her clearly. Grace adjusted my blanket like nothing had happened. "You're probably hearing things from the other wing. Sound carries at night. Try to get some rest." Before I could say anything else, she turned off the light and left. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, the echo of that scream still ringing in my ears. The next morning, I tried to convince myself it had been a dream. Maybe I'd imagined it. But when I asked one of the other nurses about room 212, she froze. Her face went pale, and she quickly said, "That room's closed off for repairs," before walking away without another word. At lunch, I told Helen what Grace had said, expecting her to laugh. Instead, she went quiet. Her hands trembled slightly as she set down her spoon. "You shouldn't talk about that room," she whispered. "People who do never stay long here." I tried to brush it off, but her words sent a chill down my spine. That night, as the halls grew silent again, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Room 212. Empty for years, they said. But if that was true, then whose screams had I heard echoing through the walls of this quiet, forgotten place? And deep down, I knew one thing. Whatever was in that room wasn't finished asking for help. The morning after I heard the screams from room 212, the air in Silver Pines felt heavier. Maybe it was just my imagination, but the hallways seemed quieter than usual. The soft chatter that usually came from the residents' lounge had been replaced by a strange, uneasy stillness. Even the nurses spoke in lower tone, their smiles tighter than before. I tried to convince myself that it had been a dream, that maybe my mind had played tricks on me, but the sound of that woman's voice, sharp, desperate, and full of fear, kept replaying in my head. It was too real to dismiss. During breakfast, I glanced around the dining room. The same faces I saw every morning were there. Helen sitting beside me, Mr. Carter complaining about his oatmeal, and Nurse Grace moving between tables, her expression calm as always. I tried to catch her eye, but she avoided my gaze, pretending to be busy with another patient. That only made my curiosity stronger. "Helen," I said quietly, "you've been here longer than me. What happened in room 212? Her spoon clattered against her bowl. She glanced around before leaning closer. "You shouldn't ask about that," she whispered. "Some things are better left alone." "What things?" I pressed. She shook her head. "People who talk about that room end up leaving, and not in the way you think." Her words sent a chill down my spine. "You mean they die?" I asked softly. Helen looked away, her lips pressed tightly together. "I didn't say that, but no one who stays near that room stays for long." Before I could ask more, Sister Evelyn appeared at our table, her smile stretched thin. "Good morning, ladies. Everything all right here?" Helen instantly went quiet, staring at her plate. I nodded politely, forcing a smile. "We're fine, sister." Evelyn's eyes lingered on me for a moment too long before she moved on. The way she looked at me made me uneasy, like she knew I was asking questions I wasn't supposed to. Later that afternoon, I decided to take a walk around the hallway near room 212. My hip still ached from time to time, but I could move steadily with my walker. The corridor was quiet, the air faintly colder than the rest of the building. When I reached the end, I saw the door to room 212. The number plate was faded, the edges of the door chipped, like it hadn't been used in years. There was a "Do Not Enter" sign taped across it, though it looked old and curled from age. I stood there for a moment, just listening. Everything was silent, but then faintly, I heard something. A soft sound, almost like crying. My chest tightened. I leaned closer, straining to hear. It was faint, but real. A woman's voice whispering, "Please help me." My pulse raced. I gripped my walker and backed away slowly. Just then I felt a presence behind me. "Mrs. Hayes," a calm voice said, and I jumped. It was Nurse Grace. She smiled gently, but there was tension in her eyes. "You shouldn't be up here. This part of the hallway isn't safe for patients. Come on, let's get you back to your room." I hesitated. "I heard it again," I said. "Someone's in there." "You heard that, didn't you?" Grace's expression softened for a moment, then she shook her head. "You're tired. This place can play tricks on your mind at night. Sometimes the pipes make strange noises." "It wasn't the pipes," I insisted. "That was a woman crying." Grace's eyes flickered toward the door, then back at me. "Please, Mrs. Hayes, just let it go." Her voice had changed. Lower, almost pleading. I wanted to keep arguing, but something about her tone stopped me. She guided me back down the hall without another word. That night, I couldn't sleep. Helen had already drifted off, her gentle snoring filling the room. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word Grace had said. She hadn't denied the sound. She hadn't even looked surprised when I mentioned it. She was scared too. Around midnight, the building grew quiet again. The faint hum of the air vents and the ticking of the wall clock were the only sounds. Then, just as I started drifting towards sleep, I heard it again. A scream. It was louder this time, echoing down the hallway. It was followed by frantic crying and the same voice. "Help me! Please! Don't leave me!" I sat up quickly, my heart pounding. "Helen!" I whispered, shaking her shoulder. "Wake up! It's happening again!" She groaned softly and turned away. "Go back to sleep, Nora," she mumbled. "You'll only make it worse." "What do you mean?" I asked, but she didn't respond. The sound continued, echoing through the hallway. I couldn't ignore it any longer. I pushed off my blanket, grabbed my walker, and slowly made my way to the door. The light in the hallway flickered as I stepped out. The sound grew clearer. Room 212 again. I shuffled toward the door, my breath quick and shallow. The crying grew louder, mixed with whispers I couldn't quite make out. I stopped a few feet away, gripping the walker tightly. The air felt cold and heavy, and for a moment, I thought I saw a shadow move behind the narrow glass window of the door. I was about to knock when the sound stopped abruptly. The silence was so thick it made my skin prickle. I stared at the door, waiting for something, anything to happen, but nothing did. Then, slowly, the door handle moved. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. It turned halfway, then stopped. My voice trembled as I whispered, "Hello? Is someone in there?" No answer. The handle stayed still for a moment, then turned back to its original position. I stumbled backward, panic rising in my throat. Just then, Sister Evelyn's voice cut through the silence. "Mrs. Hayes," she said sharply. She was standing at the end of the hallway, her eyes cold and piercing. "What are you doing out of your room at this hour?" I swallowed hard. I heard someone screaming from room 212. Her lips curved into a faint smile that didn't reach her eyes. "There's no one in room 212, Mrs. Hayes. You must have had another bad dream." She stepped closer, her voice low. "It's best if you stop wandering at night for your own safety." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the linoleum floor. I stood there for a moment, shaking, watching her disappear around the corner. That was the moment I knew something was deeply wrong. Everyone here wanted me to believe that room 212 was empty, but I had heard the screams. I had seen the shadow, and I had felt the cold air spilling out from under that door. Whatever they were hiding inside that room wasn't just a story. It was real, and I was going to find out the truth, no matter what it took. The morning after Sister Evelyn caught me in the hallway, I couldn't stop thinking about the way she looked at me. Calm, almost smug, like she knew something I didn't. Every instinct told me to leave it alone, to stop asking questions, but curiosity is a powerful thing. I wasn't just scared anymore, I was angry. Angry that everyone around me treated me like a child, that they dismissed what I'd seen and heard, and most of all, that someone might have suffered here and been forgotten. At breakfast, I tried to act normal, but my mind was racing. Helen noticed. "You're thinking about it again, aren't you?" she said quietly, stirring her oatmeal without looking at me. "Yes," I admitted. "I can't stop. There's something wrong about that room." She sighed heavily. "You don't understand, Nora. This place has secrets. People vanish and no one ever talks about it. Just don't go near it again, please." I looked at her, seeing the fear in her eyes, and realized she wasn't just superstitious. She had seen something once, something she couldn't forget. Later that day, during physical therapy, I noticed Nurse Grace walking past the door. Her face looked tired, her usual warm smile gone. When she saw me, she paused and asked how I was feeling. I hesitated, then said, "I need to talk to you, privately." She nodded and led me to a quiet corner of the lounge after the session. I didn't waste time. "Grace, I know you said room 212 is empty, but I heard it again last night. Someone's in there." Her expression flickered, fear, then guilt. She looked around before whispering, "You have to stop asking about that room, Mrs. Hayes. You're putting yourself in danger." "In danger?" I repeated. "From what? Or from who?" Grace took a deep breath. "You didn't hear it from me, but years ago, there was a patient named Lucy Peterson. She stayed in that room. She complained about how she was treated, said she was being restrained and ignored. One night, she screamed for help for hours. No one came. The next morning, she was gone. They said she died from a heart attack, but people here knew something wasn't right. My stomach tightened. And Sister Evelyn? She was the head nurse then, too, Grace said. After Lucy's death, the room was closed. Everyone was told to forget it ever happened, but sometimes people still hear her. Grace's voice trembled slightly, like she was saying more than she should. I swallowed hard. So you believe me. You know there's something there. She didn't answer. Instead, she looked at the ground. Whatever it is, it's better left alone. Promise me you won't go near that room again. But I couldn't promise that. I needed to know. That night, I made up my mind. If no one would tell me the truth, I would find it myself. After dinner, I returned to my room and waited until the halls grew quiet. The lights dimmed around 10 o'clock, and the night nurse made her rounds soon after. Helen was already asleep, her back turned toward me. I sat in bed, pretending to read until the footsteps faded. Then I reached under my pillow and pulled out a small flashlight I'd borrowed from the maintenance closet earlier that day. I slipped out of bed, grabbed my walker, and slowly made my way down the hallway. Every step felt louder than it should have, echoing softly through the silence. My heart pounded so hard it almost drowned out the faint hum of the lights. When I reached the far end, I saw the faded number on the door, 212. The Do Not Enter sign was still taped across it. The paper yellowed and peeling. The air around the door felt colder, sharper. I hesitated, gripping the walker tightly, then reached for the handle. It turned. The door creaked open just enough for me to see inside. I flicked on the flashlight, and the beams swept across the room. Dust hung in the air like fog. The bed was stripped bare, the mattress yellowed with age. The curtains were gone, and the window had been boarded up from the outside. The wallpaper was peeling, and there was a faint, musty smell of something old and forgotten. Then I saw it. Words scratched into the paint above the bed's headboard. Help me. Her name was Lucy. My breath caught. My knees felt weak, but I couldn't look away. The letters were rough and uneven, as if someone had carved them in desperation. A noise made me jump. A faint creak behind me. I turned the flashlight toward the door. Nothing. The hallway was empty. I was about to step closer when I noticed something else. A section of the wall that didn't look right. The paint there was newer, brighter. I ran my hand over it and realized it wasn't just paint. It was a hidden panel. I pressed on the corner, and the panel clicked slightly. Just then, I heard footsteps approaching. Heavy, measured steps. I froze, my heart pounding. The flashlight flickered, and in that brief second of darkness, I could hear the footsteps stop right outside the door. The handle turned. I switched off the light and moved behind the door, barely breathing. The door opened slightly, and through the narrow crack, I saw her, Sister Evelyn. Her face was expressionless, her eyes scanning the room. She carried a small metal box, the kind that locks with a key. Without a word, she knelt beside the bed, pressed something on the wall, and the hidden panel swung open. She slid the box inside, then shut it again, locking it tight. My heart pounded so hard I thought she'd hear it. Evelyn stood up, looked around once more, and quietly left, closing the door behind her. I waited until her footsteps faded before turning the flashlight back on. My hands were shaking. Whatever was in that box, whatever she was hiding, it was connected to Lucy. I could feel it. I backed out of the room and closed the door carefully behind me. My legs felt weak, but I managed to make it back to my bed before dawn. As I sat there in the dark, clutching the flashlight, I knew there was no turning back. Something terrible had happened in room 212, and Sister Evelyn was hiding the truth. The next day, I would find a way to open that wall and uncover what she'd buried all those years ago. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid anymore. I was determined. The following morning, Silver Pines felt different. The sun streamed through the windows, casting long beams across the hallway floors, but the warmth didn't reach the people inside. Every nurse moved quietly. Every patient spoke in hushed tones, and Sister Evelyn's sharp footsteps echoed through the corridors like a warning. I had barely slept. My mind kept replaying what I had seen the night before. Evelyn placing that metal box inside the hidden panel in room 212. I knew now there was proof in that box, something she didn't want anyone to find. I just had to get to it first. When Grace came to check on me that morning, she looked tired, as if she hadn't slept either. I waited until Helen went down for breakfast before whispering, "Grace, I saw her. Evelyn. She was in room 212 last night. She hid something in the..." Grace's eyes widened. "You went in there?" "Yes. And I saw what she did." Grace shook her head, her voice trembling. "You don't understand, Nora. If she catches you, she'll make sure you never leave this place." I looked her in the eyes and said, "Then help me. You said Lucy deserved justice. Don't let her be forgotten again." For a long moment, Grace was silent. Then she nodded slowly. "Meet me tonight, after rounds, when the halls are quiet." That entire day crawled by. I went through my therapy sessions, ate my meals, and smiled when the nurses walked by, pretending everything was normal. But my mind was already in room 212. Helen noticed how distracted I was and said softly, "You're going to get yourself hurt." I didn't answer. Some things were worth the risk. When night finally came, I waited in my room, the small flashlight hidden under my blanket. The hallway lights dimmed, and the usual rhythm of the night, footsteps, distant voices, the hum of the ventilation, filled the silence. Then around 11, there was a soft knock on my door. It was Grace. She stepped inside quickly, closing the door behind her. "Are you sure you want to do this?" she whispered. "Yes," I said firmly. "I need to know." Grace took a deep breath and pulled a small ring of keys from her pocket. "I managed to get these from the supply closet. One of them should open the door." We moved quietly down the hallway, every creak of the floor making my heart jump. When we reached room 212, Grace glanced around to make sure no one was watching, then slid the key into the lock. It clicked open with a faint sound, and the door creaked as it swung inward. The room looked the same as before, empty, cold, forgotten. The smell of mildew hung in the air. Grace turned on her flashlight, and we went straight to the wall where I had seen Evelyn hide the box. "There," I said, pointing to the faint outline of the panel. Grace pressed on the same spot, and it popped open with a soft click. Inside, nestled in the hollow wall, was the small metal box. Grace pulled it out carefully and set it on the dusty bed. It was old and dented, with a single lock on the front. "We need something to open it," I said. Grace looked around and spotted a thin metal rod sticking out of an old drawer. She used it to pry at the lock, her hands shaking. After a few tense seconds, it snapped open. She lifted the lid. Inside were a few folded documents, a faded photo, and something small wrapped in a white handkerchief. Grace unfolded the papers first, and her face paled as she read them. "What is it?" I asked. "They're medical reports," she said. "They show Lucy's treatment history, except the cause of death was changed. The original page says asphyxiation from restraint. It was replaced with cardiac arrest." Evelyn covered it up. I felt a chill rush through me. Grace handed me the photo next. It was of a young woman in a hospital gown, smiling softly at the camera. On the back, someone had written, "Lucy Peterson, room 212. Then Grace unwrapped the small handkerchief. Inside was a tarnished silver locket. She opened it, revealing two tiny photos, one of Lucy, the other of a little girl. Inside was a note, written in faint ink. "Please tell her I loved her. Mom." Before either of us could speak, the door suddenly slammed shut behind us. Grace gasped and spun around. Sister Evelyn stood in the doorway, her face expressionless, eyes cold and knowing. "I warned you," she said quietly. Grace stepped in front of me. "You can't keep hiding this, Evelyn. It's over." Evelyn's lips twitched. "You don't understand. Lucy wasn't stable. She attacked the staff. She begged for help," I interrupted, my voice shaking. "And you let her die." For the first time, Evelyn's composure cracked. Her face hardened. "She would have ruined everything. The board, the donors, they would have shut us down. This place helps people, but no one cares about one troubled woman. She was human," Grace said fiercely. "You buried her like she was nothing." Evelyn stepped closer. "Put the box back. Walk away, and this never happened." But before she could reach us, something strange happened. The room grew colder, and the faint hum of the lights stopped. The air felt heavy, pressing against our skin. Then, from somewhere near the bed, came a soft sound, a woman's sobbing. Grace froze. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. The crying grew louder, desperate, echoing through the room. The lights flickered, and the temperature dropped again. Evelyn backed away slowly, her face pale. "Lucy," she whispered. The sound turned into a scream, long, piercing, filled with pain. Papers flew off the bed, scattering through the air. The locket fell from Grace's hand, swinging open as if pulled by invisible fingers. Then, just as suddenly as it started, everything stopped. The air grew still again. The crying was gone. We stood there in silence, breathing hard. Evelyn was trembling, her eyes wide and wet. "She's gone," she murmured. "She finally left." Grace looked at me. "No," she said quietly. "She didn't leave. She's finally free." We took the box and left the room together. Evelyn didn't try to stop us. She just stood there, staring at the empty bed, her lips moving silently, as if praying for forgiveness. The next morning, Grace turned the evidence over to the authorities. Investigators came to the facility, quietly removing records and documents. Evelyn was suspended while an inquiry began. For the first time, the residents of Silver Pines whispered Lucy's name openly, as if speaking. It helped lift the weight that had hung over the place for years. As for me, I finally slept peacefully that night. The hall outside my room was silent. No screams, no crying, just the sound of the wind through the pines. And though I never went near room 212 again, I sometimes thought I felt warmth in that corner of the hallway, like someone finally at peace after being heard. The days that followed the night in room 212 were strange. The air in Silver Pines nursing home seemed lighter somehow, as if an invisible weight had been lifted from the halls. The whispering that used to carry through the corridors at night stopped. No more crying, no more shadows moving where there shouldn't be any. But there was still tension, a quiet unease that ran beneath the surface, because what happened in that room could never truly be erased. Sister Evelyn didn't return after that night. By morning, she had packed her things and left the facility without saying goodbye to anyone. A few days later, the police came to question the staff. Grace told them everything. She handed over the metal box, the altered records, and the locket we had found inside the wall. The investigators stayed for hours, combing through the files and interviewing nurses who had worked there for years. Word spread quickly among the residents. People whispered in the dining hall, their voices trembling between fear and relief. For the first time, everyone knew the truth. Lucy Peterson's name was finally spoken aloud. Her story had become more than a ghost tale told in passing. It was a tragedy that had been buried by silence. When the investigators left, they promised Grace that Lucy's case would be reopened. It was small justice after so many years, but it was justice nonetheless. I remember the day they sealed room 212. Maintenance came in early, boarding up the door completely. The hallway that had once made me so uneasy now felt oddly calm. As I passed by, I paused for a moment and whispered, "You can rest now, Lucy." The air around me was still, but warm, almost comforting, as if she had heard me. That night, I sat by the window in my room, watching the lights outside flicker through the pine trees. For the first time since I had arrived, the silence felt peaceful instead of heavy. Helen sat beside me, knitting quietly. She looked over at me and said, "It's finally over, isn't it?" I nodded. "Yes, I think it is." She smiled faintly. "You were brave, Nora. No one else would have gone near that room." I let out a soft laugh. Maybe I was just too stubborn to let it go. The truth was, I had never planned to become anyone's hero. I was just a lonely woman who wanted to understand why a voice had called out for help. But sometimes, life puts us in places where we're meant to listen, even when others choose silence. A week later, Grace found me sitting in the garden. She looked more at ease than I'd ever seen her. The lines of exhaustion that once marked her face had softened. She sat beside me and handed me a cup of tea. "They confirmed it," she said quietly. "The medical records were falsified. Lucy didn't die of a heart attack. She was restrained and left alone for hours. Evelyn covered it up to protect the home's reputation." I felt my chest tighten, even though I'd already known deep down what will happen to her. "She'll face charges," Grace replied, "and Lucy's daughter is being contacted. She'll finally know the truth." Hearing that broke me a little. I imagined a daughter growing up thinking her mother had died peacefully, never knowing how much she had suffered. But now, at least, she'd have answers. Closure. Over the next few weeks, Silver Pines changed. Grace was promoted to head nurse, and she brought warmth back into the place. The residents smiled more, the staff took extra time with everyone, and laughter returned to the common rooms. For the first time, it felt like a home. When the day came for me to leave, I stood in the hallway near the nurse's station, watching the morning light stream through the window. Grace hugged me tightly. "You made a difference here," she said. "You gave Lucy peace, and you reminded us all that silence can be just as cruel as guilt." I smiled, tears filling my eyes. "Thank you, Grace, for believing me." Helen came to say goodbye too, pressing a small knitted scarf into my hand. "Something to keep you warm," she said, "and a reminder that you're not crazy." We both laughed, as I was. Wheeled out to the car that would take me home, I glanced one last time at the hallway that led to room 212. The boarded door looked harmless now, just another forgotten piece of the building. But in my heart, I knew it marked something far greater, the end of a secret and the beginning of peace. Back home, life slowly returned to normal. I spent my mornings reading on the porch, my afternoons tending to my small garden. The days felt longer, the air fresher, and I found comfort in the quiet moments again. Yet sometimes, late at night, I'd wake up and think about Silver Pines, about Helen's laughter, Grace's kindness, and Lucy's voice that had reached out from beyond the grave, asking for help. One afternoon, a small envelope arrived in the mail. Inside was a letter from Grace and a photo. It was a picture of a memorial plaque installed in the hallway outside room 212. It read, "In loving memory of Lucy Peterson, 1956 to 2018, your voice was heard." Below, it was a small engraving of a silver locket. Tears welled up in my eyes as I held the photo. I realized that even in places where darkness tries to hide, truth has a way of breaking through. Lucy had been silenced for years, but now her story would live on, not as a haunting, but as a reminder that every voice matters, even those long forgotten. I placed the photo in a frame on my nightstand, beside one of my husband and me. Every night before bed, I looked at it and whispered a quiet, "Thank you," for courage, for truth, for peace. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that the truth never dies. It waits patiently to be found, no matter how deep someone tries to bury it. And sometimes, all it takes is one person who refuses to stop listening. Thank you for listening to my story. If you believe that every truth deserves to be told, make sure to subscribe to my channel and comment where you're watching from. I share stories that remind us that even in the darkest places, there's always a light waiting to be found. As I turned off the light that night, I thought I heard a faint whisper in the breeze drifting through the window, a soft, peaceful voice saying, "Thank you." And for the first time in a long while, I smiled, knowing that both Lucy and I had finally found our peace.